Welcome back to the Action Filmmaking Decoded podcast. This episode is all about the Ip Man franchise. We've been becoming pretty big fans of the franchise, right? Over the
Yeah,
years.
I'd say that it actually kind of started with Ip Man because in
That's a proper pronunciation.
that's the proper Chinese way of saying it.
Ip Man, right?
Um, it kind of started with him because when we first saw the Ip Man movies, it was something very almost kind of legendary because when you look at Flashpoint and SPL for previous Donnie Yen roles, it's like he's this crazy kind of brawler guy, but he takes a very
Yeah, no,
different
he really put a
stance.
character change in these
Yeah, it's a
movies. Yeah,
very big character change because he's this totally you know jazzed out Wing Chun master, and he's comes off as invincible, at least in the first movie, but he goes through a very good progression throughout the franchise, I would say.
yeah, and I liked how they kept pretty consistent with like the director, so he had like the same vision throughout the movies. But talking about how we first got into it, I mean, first introduced you to the movies?
Um, I think actually, I think it might have been you.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I introduced
I,
okay.
I I got a
Yeah,
lot
no,
of
I was
movies from you. I'm not gonna lie.
yeah, dude, I was a huge fanatic of the Ip Man franchise. I remember, man, I should even be saying this on air. Yeah.
Go ahead, go ahead. Just say
I
it.
remember our uncle got some DVDs. Um,
DVDs.
yeah.
Okay.
And one of them was Yip Man 1 or Yip Man 2 actually. And I was just like, "Oh, what is this Chinese film, whatever." And I was just like, "Okay." And we had a DVD player in my kitchen, and I remember like my mom was cooking and you know, she was just like, "Oh yeah, put something on the TV." So I was like, "Okay, yeah, just put this Chinese movie on for her.
Just put this
Like it
Chinese
looks
movie
pretty
on.
good." Yes. I plopped the DVD in. I know, so naive. Plopped
Yeah.
the DVD in, put it in there, and I was watching it too, and I was like almost instantly hooked because at the beginning I was like, "Oh, haha, like it's funny, like they're on the roof or whatever." And I think I was watching, and then I was like, "Oh my gosh, yo, this is probably one of the greatest things I've ever seen."
Yeah.
And then I was watching it, and I was like, "Wow!" Like, because I think at the moment I was really into Chinese kung fu movies, but I didn't. I don't know what I was thinking, but I plopped the movie in, not knowing that it was a Chinese kung fu movie, and then I started watching it, and I was like, "Yo, this is actually really good." So I
It's pretty
started with
good.
Ip Man 2. And then after that, I got more into what that was all about. I even asked my uncle if I can get like
The other ones, I
the
think.
outfit that he's
Oh,
wearing in the movie,
jeez.
because I was like, "Yo, that outfit is so dope." But he was like, "Yeah, we can go to China. We can get that outfit for you or whatever." I was like,
China.
"Yeah, dude, like that'll be amazing." If anyone has that outfit, I still want it. That would be great. But yeah, that's how I got into it. And I remember just like being so fascinated with my first watch on that little TV in my kitchen, and then kind of moving on to every single time a guest would come over, I'd play it on the the TV. I'd be like, "Yo, have you guys seen this movie? This movie's amazing." I just play it every single time a guest came
Yeah.
over.
Yeah.
And then I just yeah, I vaguely remember this, but like I showed a lot of guests Give Men too. And I put it in even my like Blu-ray player. I would play it on like the family room TV for people to see. And then I remember being like, wait, this is the second movie. So how about the first movie? So I asked my uncle to should I even be saying this on podcast too? I
Yeah.
asked my
Sure.
uncle to
Sure.
get the first movie. So I got the first movie. It was also really incredible. That's like the one with the classic fight where beats the guys up for some bags of rice, right?
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's kind of how you got into it too, because I think I showed you when you came over
Yeah.
some of the movies, and I think both of us got hooked after that.
Yeah. It was kind of strange how we started with the second movie. I don't know how that happened, but
Yeah, no, it was only because I had the one for the DVD for the second movie. I
the
didn't have the
D
one for the
yeah,
first one.
let's just call it the DVD. It was definitely the legitimate one. But
Yeah.
but
Right.
yeah, after watching the second movie, we checked out. obviously the first one, and then the third one came out, and then well, the franchise ended with the fourth one, which was a very good conclusion. But I think that what caught
Pretty
our eye the
recently.
most,
Yeah.
and what not to make an assumption, what catches most people's eyes about these movies, especially in the American setting, is the choreography. You know, the fight scenes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because you know, as soon as these movies came out, I think millions, or at least you know, hundreds of thousands of people started practicing Wing Chun afterwards.
Yeah, no, the style became very popular
Yeah,
after that.
it was like a
What
movement.
was your opinion of the first movie?
The first movie is always gonna have a soft spot in my heart because
I would say it was probably the best one. The first or the second are probably the best ones.
the first one, in my opinion, is the best one because, well, really, somehow they managed to carve out the main character as this almost invincible, um, immovable kind of martial arts master. Like, you know, he can fight 10 guys.
Right.
He can just, you know, destroy
Yeah,
anyone.
dude. I know, yeah.
Yeah. And you
You
know,
were like it was almost like you were like, man, there's like literally no one that can beat this guy. You
yeah,
know?
yeah.
Yeah.
And nobody could at the time. And you know, aside from the themes of, you know, oh, even though this guy is like the best martial artist out there, or at least he seems to be, he's kind of useless in the state of war. But um, I think that, well, the fight scenes definitely caught everybody's eye.
Hmm.
Themes aside from the movies, you know,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
no, it's pretty incredible. I remember some of the best fight scenes in that movie was I think it started out with the one where he was fighting in his house, right? With the
yeah,
with the other guy who was trying to challenge everyone,
yeah.
right?
There was another master from one of the martial arts schools, not the art schools in Foshan, and
Yeah.
he wanted to test his skills against Yitman because he was the new guy in town,
Right.
and that was when we first got a taste of when Yitman could really. He was quite skilled. That's how I would put it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the very first fight scene in the movie is the guy who first came to town, and then the second one is the northerner. That was Fancy Wong, and
Mm.
he was, you know, beating up all the other masters. And then when he went to Yaman's house, they started fighting because Yaman had to protect the pride of Foshan, and you know, Fancy Wong was pretty much messing up his house. um,
Hmm.
but there
Yeah,
are
that was a
certainly
pretty cool fight. I
what?
remember it. They added some pretty interesting stakes in there. Where it was like the little kid like riding on the bicycle and like he was like fighting with like different equipment from his house, like different pieces of furniture. And
Yeah,
I remember there was like a feather or something.
yeah. Well, the the kid part was kind of funny. The equipment, I think it was a feather duster and the Northerner's sword, and that
Hmm.
was certainly interesting, especially, you know, in the second part of the fight. Really, the main thing that I take from it is when you look at Fan Xiu Wong, sorry, and Donnie Yen, they're both fighting with a very different kind of energy. You know how Yaman is always very calm and collected in his fights, and he
Yeah.
is kind of immovable. And
Hmm.
you see this guy that's fighting him as totally how do I say it? Well, very hyper. That's how we
Bloodthirsty.
usually put it. Very hyper. He's jumping around everywhere. He's trying to use a lot of brute strength and speed. And
Hmm.
Yitman
Very
is
showy
always,
too.
yeah,
I do remember that. Yeah.
yeah. They're usually very showy, but Yitman has a very conservative fighting style because, well, 70% of it is defense and the rest is countering. And I think that right before they started using the feather duster and the sword, um, when he really started countering, he was just able to knock him out cold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely.
Yep.
Yeah. So it really, I think that was one of like the first times you really saw his true skill, right?
Yeah, and that was probably the part where everybody fell in love with Yip Man. But I think we could definitely talk more about the 1 versus 10 scene with the
Yeah,
black
that was
belts.
probably that was the other really prominent scene in this movie. I think this is when his friend dies, pretty much,
Yeah,
because the Japanese come and invade, and basically they have this rink where people are fighting for a bag of rice, and
yeah.
his friend goes up against several. I think his friend goes up against five people uh,
Um,
initially.
he tries to go up against 3 black belts, and then
Three. Yeah.
well he loses, and then he gets shot in the head by the colonel, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So it was three. Yeah. Yeah.
but he
So he
tried.
gets
He
shot in
tried.
the head, and then this is kind of like a blood-fueled match between Yip Man and the 10 black belts, because he kind of has this kind of need to avenge his friend.
That's where you see a shift in the emotion, because now he's not just fighting defensively. Obviously, now he's really trying to hurt these guys. I think some of them he actually kills. So
Hmm.
it's very uncharacteristic of him, and it does show kind of a human side to him,
Yeah.
especially with how he deals with the last black belt, because he's looking him straight in the
Yeah.
face and he
No.
just keeps punching him.
This is the fight where he goes ham. Literally,
He goes,
he goes
yeah, he
ham.
goes
It's
ham.
legendary.
Yeah.
If you guys haven't seen it, you got to see that movie.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty incredible. It's one of those fight scenes where, for the first time, when you see it, you're like, "Oh my gosh!" It takes you by surprise because I don't think anyone's ever seen something like that, so like visceral on screen, done in that way, and these guys are professionals, so it's just amazing to see like the way they've coordinated 10 guys versus one man.
Yeah, it's certainly something to behold, and in a way that kind of is the I don't want to sound pretentious, like the beauty of choreography,
Yeah.
because like you can tell a story and you can show emotion through a fight scene, and
Mhm.
that's good. That's good.
But starting up the second movie, what were your favorite parts?
My favorite fights were probably well, the one with where he starts fighting Sammo Hung, the table fight scenes, if you
Yeah,
remember.
yeah,
Yeah,
dude.
that
I
was
do remember that.
pretty amazing, because well, first off, the very first fighter, remember, I think he was a short guy. He showed off this very acrobatic kind of style, very show offy and flashy, and then he kind of gets his he gets it handed to him, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like how they build it up in that scene too, where first he fights, like the first two, and then like he kind of goes into fighting like the grand master of like the group, and
yeah,
which is Sammo Hung, which is really awesome,
yeah,
because it kind of builds up this tension, like, oh, like, who are you, like, you're like a nobody, like, why are you coming in here? And then they're like, oh shit, like, he just comes in and he just beats the shit out of like these two other guys, and now he's going for the big one.
yeah. Sammo Hung is definitely he's quite amazing in that movie. Like,
Yeah,
he
yeah,
has this very dominating presence, if you,
right.
you get what I mean. And in his um in his fight scene with Yip Man, they don't give a very clear winner, because I actually just heard about it a few days ago, when I was watching Accented Cinema's video on Yip Man 4.
Mhm.
Originally, the director's intention for the second movie and the movies beyond was to start giving Yip Man more challenges in his fight scenes,
Mhm.
because that
Because the first one, he seemed like this invincible
yeah,
dude, which is,
yeah,
like you said, beating up everybody without any
limit,
show that he was vulnerable.
yeah. I think that in the director's mind, it was kind of what took away a lot of the suspense and tension, because you already know he's gonna win. You
Yeah,
you're not worried. But I think that even though he's invincible, there's still a great appeal in watching him fight because of how,
Yeah.
well, one, how masterful he is, and two, what kind of emotion you can derive out of the fight
Yeah.
scenes.
But yeah, I agree with you that they just started adding more ups and downs, I guess, starting the second movie. So that therefore, like Sammo Hung was more of like they wanted to show you first that they were neck to neck, and then
Yep.
after that, they kind of bring in this other boxer guy, right? If I remember
Yeah.
correctly, they introduced his character, right? And
Yeah.
I think first off, I don't want to really ruin the films for people that, well, I don't know why you're listening to this if you haven't seen it yet, but um, yeah, basically he goes up against Sammo Hung,
Killed him.
and yeah, and he killed him because but I think that's a really pivotal moment because it shows like first they show that Yip Men and Samo are kind of neck to neck, so they're pretty much similar in skill,
Skill.
and then they kind of bring in this guy who just beats the shit out of Sammo Hung, and then you're kind of like, oh, maybe, it kind of gives you like that sense of like there
Tension.
is a challenge here for him,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I think that when they brought in Mr. Miller, they created a
Mhm.
very interesting paradigm into a martial arts film because um, the maybe it's because I haven't really explored much in terms of filmography, but the only time I've seen that was in another Jet Li movie, um,
Mhm.
where I can't remember the martial arts he was depicting, but you usually don't see people with different styles being pitted against each other because
Yeah.
it's almost, well, it's almost unheard of. Boxing versus kung fu. It's like, oh, obvious. The Western perspective is like, oh, obviously kung fu is going to win because it's kung fu. It's all these flips and tricks and kicks and whatever, and boxing is just punching. But
Yeah.
really, when unfortunately, Yitman gets his ass handed to him in the first round, and then he has to start changing up his style to the Hungar, which was what Sammo Hung was using. Um,
Yeah.
it sort of shows that people with different styles can beat. That it's not about whose style it's better. It's more about how skilled is each practitioner, and that
Yeah.
shows itself again in the fourth movie, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think like you were talking about with boxing, right?
Yeah,
How you were like, "Oh yeah, obviously Chinese kung fu is going to win, right?"
yeah.
But I think they really showed within the first couple matches like the brute strength of Darren's character
Darren's
in that
character.
film. Yeah. They
Yeah.
they showed a lot of his strength, like they showed him throwing around people.
Oh
They
yeah.
showed it how hard his like punches were hitting, like you can really feel um the strength in that fight.
Especially with I think before that scene there was a demonstration. He was asking one of the kung fu students to hit him, and he was like, oh, punch me, and they were all trying to hit his chest. The last guy, in his last attempt, he actually tried, and Mr. Miller just knocked him out of out of spite in a way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's definitely a very, like, racially filled movie, I'd say, because of how the different races are being portrayed, I'd say.
Yeah, without a doubt, Yip Man 1, 2, and 4. I'll we'll talk about 3 later, but
Mhm.
those 3 movies in a franchise are definitely um, fueled by, I guess you could call it, an anti-racist vibe.
Yeah,
That's the best
definitely.
way I can put it.
But I think the main takeaway from that movie was, it wasn't really about, like, the strength, but more about, like, the actual technique that he was using to help, win the fight in the end.
Well, it was definitely a very good fight scene. I think that the fact that Yip Man had to change styles afterwards is a good move, and
Mhm.
they definitely, well, I would certainly hand it to them that they captured the power of boxing very well. And when I say power, I mean strength, but they also included there's a lot of speed and angle work to boxing that a lot of people, I think, I don't want to assume I
Yeah.
but a lot of people don't really see it because it looks like just punching, but there's an art to
Right.
it too. That's why it's called a martial art.
So let's talk a little bit about the third movie then.
Yeah.
This movie, I'd have to say, wasn't one of my favorites,
Really?
per se. I don't know how you feel about this.
Um, it's actually close to his second favorite. Well, for different reasons, but in
For you,
terms of
okay.
fight scenes, it ranks kind of low on the scale.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The movie is about how Yip Man has to deal with his wife's cancer, and there is, I guess, a secondary antagonist in the movie, played by Zhang Jin. Um,
Yeah.
they actually the character's name is Master Z, and he has a movie of its own. I didn't know either until earlier this year. But
Yeah, yeah, I did see that too. Yeah.
yeah, um, the unfortunately the only notable fight scene in that movie, no discredit to the can I can't call it a cameo, like a reference to Bruce Lee, because
Right.
Bruce Lee doesn't do too much in this movie, not as much as he does in the next movie. But
Hmm.
the most notable fight scene in this one is, well, okay, there's two of them. The one with Mike Tyson
Yeah. Yes.
and
Yes.
the one
Tyson
with
is.
Zhang Jin,
Yeah.
which comes afterwards. But let's talk about Mike Tyson first, because this is a bit of
Yeah.
it felt like a very random inclusion. I remember you talking
Right.
about that.
Yeah. I was like, I forgot how he was included into this movie.
It was through some gang relation, but I think
Mhm.
that you said it better before, where it kind of just like they kind of forced him into it, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He did feel a little forced into it.
It was kind of like revisiting the fight with Mr. Miller because, well, boxing versus Wing Chun. Um, I think that they did a pretty good job with the fight scene because, well, the director certainly got what he wanted when making the stakes higher because neither party really won, and it was because it
Mhm.
was a timed fight. Titled it, and
Yeah.
certainly you can appreciate the kind of power and the speed that Mike Tyson shows. But it's also a very interesting scene because you see Yip Man take a very different stance. Do you remember the scene where he started, like crouching down very slowly on one leg? He waited for him
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
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 I was like, oh, now he's really pulling out the,
The
he's really pulling out
big moves.
the big moves. Um, but yeah, it was a very interesting fight scene. Not the best. In fact, I'd say that I kind of prefer the one with Mr. Miller a little more. But it's not bad by any means. I don't think there are any bad fight scenes in Yip Man
No,
by any
yeah.
means.
No, these guys are always really good at coordination with these
Yeah,
fight scenes.
yeah. And the last fight scene is probably the most extensive look at Wing Chun because, well, really,
Mhm.
it's two different Wing Chun schools. So there's Master Z and there's Yip Man,
Mhm.
and they both explore um, the art a little more because they don't just use, the
Right.
long pole. They also take out, I think they're called butterfly swords. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, butterfly swords. Um,
Yeah.
and then they use, hand to hand combat. But it really explores more of what there is to the art, including the weapons. And
Mhm.
you never, excuse me, you never imagine Yip Man holding a sword. Yeah,
I let's talk about the staffs too. I remember they were using these long staffs.
yeah. That I actually, I think I like that part of the scene. Actually, no, there's something good about each of the parts of the fight. Really, it's like a three-act thing. You have staffs where they show a lot of power and manipulation,
Hmm.
The knives are more about, speed and dexterity and reaction. And then
Yeah.
hand to hand is where it all culminates. You have all the force, all the speed, all the reaction time, and it makes something really, I guess you could call it beautiful.
How about we move on to the fourth movie now?
That will be an interesting case because that one has Scott Adkins.
Yeah, Scott Atkins, man. I do remember watching a lot of Scott Atkins kind of stuff on YouTube. He has like a lot of like really crazy martial arts acrobatic type uh fight scenes. I remember he was doing like a lot of flips, a lot of high kicks. I think that's what he's known for, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about his movie in Ip Man 4. I think this starts out where um his wife passed away
yeah,
already.
yeah,
Yeah. And now he's dealing with his son and moving to America, that whole storyline. So it's more about Ip Man's story in America.
yeah. And that does take an interesting turn because I've actually heard a statement about the story itself where some people were saying that it was really just Ip Man 2 rehashed because it's the same story about racism, but there was a very good video by again Accented Cinema. Unfortunately, that video was taken down, but
Oh, really?
yeah, hopefully it goes back up soon because it was talking about um, how to write racism, I guess.
Mhm.
And they did bring a very interesting case up with Scott Adkins' character. Overall, this movie was a little bit more tame. Well, no, actually, no,
Mm.
it was a little more less giving with the choreography and the
Right.
fight scenes. But there were certainly some very interesting scenes. Let's talk about the Bruce Lee scene first, where he fought the karate guy in the alley.
I do remember the scene. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
where he's like, um, where they're all at the diner, and the guys come in and they're like, "Hey, like, just take this outside," and then like he's like, "Don't worry, Mr. Ip, like, I'll be fine." And then he goes outside, and then like all his boys are like whooping their ass.
yeah. There were actually, I don't know how accurate it is, but there were people who did say that Bruce Lee would accept public challenges. Um, and
Is that
he's
right?
Bruce Lee.
Wow.
He would fight he would win all the time. So this was a good thing to include, and I do like how they took a more realistic look at Bruce Lee because obviously he's not gonna be invincible. I don't think anybody
Mhm.
is, and they did show him get hit. They did show him he got bruised. I'm pretty sure,
Yeah.
but he won. He won his way, and they showed a very I guess you could say that they show how Jeet Kune Do really started the dynamics and the whiplash movements of modern MMA. They do call Bruce Lee the father of modern MMA for that reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are two fight scenes where him and I gotta find his name. I'm sorry, I gotta find his name.
Yeah. Uh,
Master Wan. Master Wan. Okay, so the first fight scene is with the table rotator. You know whenever we go to a Chinese restaurant, there's the
yeah, like the lazy Susie thing.
yeah, the lazy Susie. And Master Wan tries to induct him into the martial arts school's union, and Yip Man refuses because Master Wan doesn't accept Bruce Lee because Bruce Lee teaches kung fu to non-Chinese. But it culminates in them, tossing the book and the cup of tea back and forth, and it ends with the lazy Susie shattering. And I think that was very cool visually because it's less about the moves and more about the tension. But they expand on that later with the second fight scene, which is unfortunately cut short by an earthquake.
Yeah.
That was kind of it's like, oh man, come on.
Yeah, like that earthquake. Where did it come out from?
Well, it is San Francisco. It it was very short, so we can't really say much about it, but it was a good taste. I'd say it was a good taste.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I do see kind of how it was a rehash of Ip Man 2, just because of how, you do have like this tension, and obviously, he comes in and he still has to come in and fight, the new grandmaster or whoever it is, but then eventually both of them end up turning to face a similar enemy.
Scott Atkins as the drill sergeant is a very, very, I think, the best villain in the Ip Man franchise. But
Hmm.
on his skill, it's good. um,
Hmm.
it's certainly interesting to see him use American karate because, well, it's definitely different from what we've seen from Ip Man 1 with the
Hmm.
last fight scene with the general. Um, but the kind of hate that you can see in his fighting style, the kind of malice, speaks a lot. And we can first see that with his scene with Master Wan. He hospitalizes him. Master Wan actually puts up a much better fight than I expected him to. He throws him to the ground a lot, like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot. And it was very cool to see such a floaty fighting style, I guess.
Hmm.
And well, he hospitalizes him, unfortunately. And the second fight scene with Ip Man, like you said, it's a rehash of Ip Man 2 because he's getting payback again, and he's
Hmm.
protecting the dignity of the Chinese again.
Yeah.
But there are certain points that I do really like. First off, they show Ip Man is aging. He has arthritis now.
Yeah.
Yeah, his fingers are. So, some people say it's from an injury before, but I didn't really remember that at first. So I just sort of took it as, oh, he really is getting older. You can even see his face is sagging a little more. But
Hmm.
his fight with the drill sergeant, though he didn't have much to show for in the beginning, in the end, he wrapped it up very quickly. And I think that there is more than meets the eye that goes behind it because it's not just about getting payback. It's also what the franchise has led up to is that he knows that he has limitations, and now they're really coming forth because he's getting old. You know, Miman
Hmm.
is getting old, so
Yeah.
gotta
I
end
think
the
it's the
fight
same thing
quickly.
like they do with Logan.
Yeah, kind of like Logan. That's a good comparison.
Right.
And what really surprised me in the end with how swiftly he beat him down was that it was actually the only time that I've seen him use. Do you remember in the first movie with the general, he was gonna jab his freaking he was gonna jab his throat in with the finger strike, and
Yeah.
in this movie he actually does it. I
Hmm.
didn't expect that at all.
Yeah. 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 He does, and he's like kind of choking at the end.
Yeah, it was it looked very uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but it was a very good fight scene because of how I wouldn't call it brutal, but I would call it steadfast because of
Right.
how quickly he resolved the fight at the end, and that's
Hmm.
it's a good fight scene for different reasons. You know, all most okay, all the fight scenes in Ip Man are good for different reasons, and I think we can
Hmm.
leave it off at that.
Yeah, man, for sure. Um, well, thank you for joining us on this whole Yipman
Very long
journey.
episode.
Very long episode, unexpectedly long episode. But if you guys want us to go in depth into each one of these individual fights, I know this is kind of like a brief overview, but if you guys want us to go in depth into a singular fight scene, which is something I think we should do. We should focus more on individual fights, and we could talk a lot about individual fights
Yeah.
instead of just going way over on like this huge overview of like a whole
Yeah.
franchise,
I
which is
mean,
crazy.
it's a whole franchise, and there's a lot put into every fight scene. We do have
Yeah,
to.
there's a lot. There's a lot. So if you guys want to see specific breakdowns of each individual fight scenes, I think that's what we're gonna focus on a little bit more
Yeah.
for this series. But thank you for joining us for this episode, this long episode about
Long episode.
the Ip Man franchise. And we hope you join us for future episodes.